The following podcast may include coarse language, graphic content, and politically and/or religiously sensitive material. Those of you who are offended by such content should fuck off. Hey there! This is a Daemoneye podcast, the thing we do sometimes. Remember that?
No, I honestly don't. It's lost in the depths of time.
It's been 8 months, and things have happened, lots of things, long things, but we're not giving up on this quite yet.
Still here. You're never going to get rid of me, at least not that easily or without antibiotics.
You kind of got rid of yourself. Well, you moved to New Mexico. So are you Breaking Bad now?
I prefer to think of it as escaping California.
Oh, come now. You know I still live in the bloody state.
I know. One of us had to get free.
Oh, I like it here. Let's just leave it at that. Well, anyway. Different strokes for different folks, I suppose. All right. This is the Daemoneye podcast, episode 15. Multiverses, You and Yourselves. My name is Tristan Eifler.
Damn it, Morty. Who do you think I am? Hunter S. Thompson.
That was Tyler.
Technically, it's J. Tyler Burrell, but, you know.
This is the podcast where we discuss role-playing games, fantasy and sci-fi fiction, science, technology, geek culture, and how I learned to stop worrying and love the Hypnotoad. All hail to the Hypnotoad. All hail to the Hypnotoad. Okay, so it's been 8 months since we did this thing, but we have a damn good excuse for it this time. Well, I have a good excuse. Tyler has a damn good excuse. My good excuse was I've been teaching a lot of students about chemistry. A lot of students, like from 3 different colleges. Tyler, what's your really good excuse?
I moved out of state. Got a new house.
Yeah.
Started renting out rooms for rent, and basically had to restart my life.
Well, it's not the first time you've done that, to be fair.
True.
And wasn't it awesome every time in the beginning, to be fair?
Well, every time life has gotten a little bit better. And now the only way it could get even better would be to have my own domed-over football field-sized compound with a death ray on top.
Well, to be fair, in Arizona, you can probably buy one of those and get a tax write-off for it.
Oh, I know I can.
Sorry, New Mexico. New Mexico.
I know I can. That's one of the reasons I moved out here.
Well, as I was saying, I've been busy as hell. I've been teaching chemistry at 3 different colleges. I won't say which one specifically, but it's been a pain in the ass. But it's also enjoyable. I got to teach organic chemistry again for the first time in a long while, and a bunch of other chemistry courses, and I made a lot of moolah in the process, and things are settling from here finally a little bit. And you just told me what you were doing, Tyler. But it has left me very little time for creative writing or working on other projects or otherwise, I just haven't had the mental energy for it, frankly. Hell, I haven't had a chance to go walk as often either.
Yeah, I've been dropping weight like a rock ever since I moved here.
Well, you've been dropping weight even for a long time now.
Yeah, but ever since I had to have that emergency surgery, it's gotten a lot difficult.
Well, I mean, that's what it does. It basically makes it hard for you to handle fats, and that's almost a natural dietary. Nouns fail me for a second there, but yeah. Yeah,
Still, though, I have not been healthier any time in my life, and that's including when I was in the Army.
How's your leg going, though? I'm guessing the hot, warm weather is helping it out quite a bit.
The warm weather is helping it out, and the jacuzzi in my backyard is helping even more.
Well, things are sweet. Things are settled, and now things can only get better. Of course, things can always get worse, but we hope things will get better. That's what we call beautiful stupidity, I think.
I prefer to think of it this way. Always prepare for the worst. Because that way, at least half the time, you're pleasantly surprised, and the other half, you're never disappointed.
Paraphrased by Benjamin Franklin, your all-American hero.
Yeah, guy just needed a cape and an emblem on his chest.
And he was also a mad scientist.
I know. He's my idol.
On top of being a statesman, philosopher, and also, weirdly enough, a ladies' man, despite having a paunch.
He was the original Pimp Daddy.
All right, but let's talk about the future. Now, the next semester is going to be I'm thinking, a lot less stressful for me, a lot less demanding. So which means we might finally see that long-promised upsurge in productivity, both as far as my own personal writing projects go and for Daemoneye Publishing as a whole. How about you, Tyler?
I'd say I'm probably anywhere between a quarter and a fifth of the way through finishing Heroes of Horror, or the Heroes of Horror core tome, which is pretty significant since it's going to be a 500 to 600 page book.
And to be fair, we just also, well, not recently, but we released Dragonfire, and it was okay. It's out. So that's another product we can tick off our belts, and hopefully we'll have another one coming soon.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully won't have the same torture production path as Dragonfire. Again, no offense against that product, but this took a long time to get out.
Oh, it was freaking monstrous, man. Just the art headaches alone were annoying as all hell.
Hence the phrase "development hell."
Yeah, it wasn't a problem with the artists. It was a problem with the scheduling and everything. We'd get like an art piece delivered, only to find out that we couldn't use it for one reason or another, and have to go back and start over again.
Well, to be fair, our main artist, we had a couple, but our main artist was always very accommodating. So shout out to him.
Oh yeah, Kurt Dentz is, you're my hero.
Kurt Denson?
Dentz, D-I-N-S-E.
Oh, I see. No, I meant for Dragonfire.
Oh, for Dragonfire. Yeah, sorry about that, Kurt. Sorry, for some reason I thought we were talking about the Dead Stars rulebook.
No, I'm talking about Dragonfire.
I'm sorry.
I think the desert heat is doing you in there, Tyler. Your brain in a bit there, Tyler.
Well, I was boiling it about an hour ago.
Yep. All right, so future plans. Again, I'm planning to finally finish off the epilogue of the Patreon story I've been working for a while, and maybe finally get to my long-awaited third book of the Lycanthrope Club. It's one of those things which is stalled. It's reaching R.R. Martin-esque levels of delayed.
Nah,
not something I'm proud of.
It won't get there until it's finally adapted into a TV show that runs longer than the book material.
Well, not initially. It was a great leap in the sky, then a slow, steady decline until it hits the last episode. I don't think it was that terrible, but I can understand people saying that the quality dipped and it really diverged from the books.
Well, I heard Starbucks loved the product placement. That was
no comment there.
That was intended to be a joke about that one scene where there was a Starbucks cup on the table.
Yeah, I just remembered that. It wasn't the only time either. It was well, in any event, there's that story. Beyond that, there are a whole bunch of little products in the embryonic stage. You just have to pick which one we go to. But beyond that, let's also talk about some more personal stuff before we go into more of the company states. Again, we have a lot of baggage, a lot of information to dump here, so just bear with us here before we get to the actual topic. I've been getting back through, since I finally have some more free time, I actually downloaded a few video games. I play video games at the same rate I watch movies, the big screen these days, which is to say not that frequently, like frequency I go to the dentist, but maybe a little bit more. Two games I picked up this week are Graveyard Keeper and Disco Elysium. Have you heard of either of those games, Tyler?
New to me.
Okay, Graveyard Keeper. Basically, do you know Stardew Valley?
Heard of it.
Yeah, it's basically like It's a Harvest Moon-esque life simulator where you play a guy trapped in another world. A little bit like just a tad bit like Army of Darkness, only his job is to take care of a graveyard. It's like, a harvest sim where a farming sim where you can raise crops, mine stuff, craft stuff. But in Graveyard Keep, there's also your main job is, one of the main jobs is to take corpses and prepare them for, burying, like remove things like the blood, the fats, the bones, internal organs, that sort of thing. Then you bury them in the church. Well, you can do that, or you can say, you can cremate them. That's an option. Or, and this is actually a main way of getting money, you can take the flesh, prepare it, and sell it to an unsuspecting tavern keeper as meat.
So it's basically a cooking simulator using dead bodies.
Well, that's one of the things. There is also cooking, but you can also take the bodies and at a certain point raise them and make them your zombie slaves. I'm not kidding. It's one. And there's no moral consequences to do any of this shit. Like at one point, not much of a spoiler, but a bit of a spoiler, you are commanded by an inquisition to prepare a snack table for the witch burning because the townsfolk have gotten tired of all the witch burnings are boring now. So they think, hey, if we bring in some high quality beer and food and sell it there, they'll draw more of a crowd. And that's exactly what happens. Of course, there are only two sources of meat in the game. You can kill a lot of frogs and make frog meat, or you can harvest all that flesh, get the official stamp from the tavern keeper, and then you sell them, burgers, very smoky meat. And again, there are no moral consequences for this.
Sounds like a wonderful time.
It's actually grindy as hell, and unless you're a sort of person who likes to grind, I wouldn't recommend it. And if you are the person who starts to grind, I still wouldn't recommend it because it will just devour your free time. I was up at 3 a.m. playing this, and then I realized, what the hell am I doing? It's like Harvest Moon, but even, it's just so easy to fall into a pattern where you just, one more day, kind of like Civilization's one more turn phenomenon. So I'd recommend it for the grindy types, but with a warning, it can consume you if you let it. So that's Graveyard Keeper. Fun, I suppose, for a certain value of fun. It does have a certain humor to it, though, as you probably guessed. There's the donkey, for example, who brings you the corpses, is a committed communist, and at a certain point he stops working until you start oiling his wheel wagon and providing him with carrots every time he brings you a corpse. And your friend is a talking skull named Gary.
Okay, that one's funny.
And that is a reference. That is a reference to something, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's one. The other one is Disco Elysium. I've been playing it recently. Also, this is probably one of the best PC role-playing games I've ever played. It's definitely influenced by the Infinity engine, the Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment series. It's not much of a number-crunching game. It's just, again, I give it praise for some of the originality of it. It's so fucking well written. It's very original, too. And although it's not very complicated as far as, building skill points, getting weapons, it's very heavily role-playing. It's almost a conversation simulator where you play basically an amnesiac police officer, solving a murder. What's interesting about it is the skills. Well, first of all, there's some really cool skill. They have a standard set of physical, motor, psyche, emotional skills and intellect skills. But, the skill sets are, you have some pretty familiar stuff like empathy or hand-eye coordination. But then there are the other odd skills. Like there's one called the half-light. It represents your fight or flight response. And then there's another skill, which is really cool, called shivers. It's a physical skill that is supposed to represent your old, ancient, primordial senses that, you almost evolved out of but don't have. It's the sensation where the hair in the back of your neck rises. It lets you detect, temperature changes. And what it really is, it's about your connection to the city where you play in. It actually, the skill itself has kind of its own little story about what it is. And there's another really good idea, another thing, one more skill I'll mention before I kind of explain more, is a skill called Inland Empire. And yes, that is a reference to Lynch. It represents your imagination, your dreamscape. It lets you have conversations with inanimate objects and sometimes maybe get some useful information out of it. Pretty trippy stuff. But what's really cool about it is that all these skills, they are presented as having their own personalities in the dialogue. As in, you're talking to a character, you make a logic check, your logic actually speaks to you saying, this makes sense because so-and-so, but then maybe your drama skills, which represents, your artistic side goes, no, it's much more dramatic if we do this. Or if you're, the Half-Life goes, kill him now, he's a threat. There's actually this internal dialogue between these different aspects of your skill set or personality, and it just is very, very good. I'll just leave it at that.
Honestly, it sounds like the developers were on LSD when they were designing it.
Drugs are a big part of it. Drugs are something you can take during the game. They give you a stat boost. well, they increase your skill ranks, but there's a cost to it, of course.
Sorry, you got me. It's just not piquing. It's not piquing my interest at all.
It's more pure role playing. It's, I would recommend if you don't like that sort of thing, be more of a stat. If you like role playing, but you like more of the stats and more kind of the conventional stuff, but not so much. You might like it, you may not, but I for one absolutely loved it. I'm just gonna put a shout for those 2 games where I've been playing. So that's my long spiel about that. How about you, Tyler?
Well, a game I haven't been interested in a lot of the newer games that have come out recently. It's kind of like either flash in the pan stuff or good ideas that have just completely been destroyed by microtransactions. But one game that's been getting a lot of hype recently that does pique my interest is Greedfall.
Which game? Sorry,
Greedfall. It's a role-playing game that's basically an MMO simulator where you play a group of colonists from a fictional European style country trying to colonize an island out in the middle of the fiction on the other side of the fictional world. It's like it's kind of like a redo of the American colonization, but with magic and alchemy that actually works.
I have heard of this, and I've read a few reviews. It's been described as a pretty good game, not amazing, but but very competent and fairly compelling.
Exactly, that's the reason I've been looking at it.
It's by a company, I forget their name, but they have a track record of making, of being a good, honest, hardworking company that makes decent, but not quite AAA, but good, solid games, which is something I think is kind of rare, these days, which are not riddled with microtransactions and stores. But that's the topic of a whole other subject, which we don't usually get on anyway. So yeah, I've heard it definitely. Yeah,
I've noticed that a lot of good AA games have been coming out every now and again from smaller studios.
I would actually characterize Disco Elysium as that. It has good voice acting too, decent graphics. So yeah, I think the age of AAA is gone. Long live the age of the AA.
Yeah, I am a little excited about the future of video games because it seems, as far as sales figures go, that the upcoming AA industry is doing better than the AAA industry.
Well, because the AAA industry, by definition, they have to go all out. They have to invest millions and millions of dollars. It's more expensive to make a fucking AAA game. And when you have a project that big, and this is something I think they actually talked about in an old podcast I watched / listened to on Let's Drown Out, that when you have an entity, a project that size with all the money involved, the guys in charge, the bean counters, they're going to want to put a lot of people in on it. The problem is that a lot of games, unless you have a really just machine-like production studio like throughput, more people is going to make it more complicated. A good game is actually better if you have a small, focused but well-oiled team rather than like hundreds of people rendering every single pixel on the main character's left buttock.
Yeah, I saw a review on that kind of, or not a review, but a video on that kind of a phenomenon on YouTube a while back. They were charting the progression of quality for, if I remember correctly, it was the not Halo, the Mass Effect series, and they were charting the quality of the Mass Effect series, and then relating it to the number of people that were at each development stage of the game, and how a lot of people were disappointed with the ending of Mass Effect 3, and then they tripled the number of people on the production team for Mass Effect Andromeda, and it just went to shit.
Yeah, it's one of those those games that became like the martyrs of this overproduction culture. Yeah. So I think what they should really focus on gameplay first. Then you render the graphics as best you can. That's the way it should be done, honestly. Because some of these AAA games, their gameplay is startlingly simplistic and not that original, but they want to play it safe because there's so much money involved. They also have to play it safe. They only invest in tried and true methods, and you get basically either generic mush or disgusting mush.
Yeah, nobody's going to buy the 50th time you've Xeroxed something.
Unfortunately, there's this big group of people who just buy the latest AAA games because that they do know the 13-year-olds of the world,
yeah.
or the Call of Duty fanatics who just buy it because, or worse, the Madden folks.
Well, do you know what the single largest grossing entertainment media product in the world is?
That would be Star Wars.
Nope.
Oh, go ahead.
It's not. It's actually not Star Wars.
Okay, I think I've actually saw a chart for this before. I know it's near the top. I know that's a couple of Japanese franchises are up there. What is the top one?
Grand Theft Auto Online.
Oh, video game franchise. Oh, yeah. No, it is media and video game. I forgot about that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's somewhere up in the multiple billions like multiple billions by this point. And it's all because of little like 50 cent and $1.50 microtransactions to get a new skin on the car you just stole.
Yeah, which I don't care for. I mean, but I think we're getting off on a tangent here. A good tactic, we'll go back to the actual topic soon, I fear sorry. But a good tactic is to test the gameplay out on a tabletop setting first. Then transition it to the game core loop. Then transition to an actual video game. That's what they should always do, in my opinion, unless it's the nature of the game just precludes it, like a first-person shooter.
True. That's
how Disco Elysium started out as. They first kind of tested the base system as a role-playing game, tabletop, then they made a video game.
Well...
And I loved it. Yeah. Yep. The setting was written by a guy who loved role-playing games. He wrote the setting for a tabletop role-playing game, then they transitioned it to a video game. It was this Estonian writer, because you can definitely see the Eastern European influence in the game's aesthetic and narrative.
I'll have to take your word for it, since I haven't actually gotten into that one.
Fair enough. I mean, again, it's not everyone's, but if you like that narrative sort of games, it's great. It's a great option. All right, so that's personal stuff. Let's talk about more of the company stuff a little bit more, then we'll get into the actual topic. So as a lot of you listeners know, we actually have a webcomic now based off my series, The Lycanthrope Club. We're hoping to have another webcomic series going off Tyler's sets, as Tyler's had several ideas for webcomic. Just a matter of getting more and more people reading it, and more people, contributing to the Patreon so we can afford to pay the artist for her troubles. And she's been her name is Abby Cow. Great artists. She's been very reliable, delivering the full page of decent art, a little more than once a month. So, but if we get some more Patreons,
it's always the situation we're in. We need more publicity to get the money that we need to make the material that'll get us more publicity. It's a vicious circle.
Well, the good news is we're up to our Patreon's around $100 per month right now.
Oh, that is good.
So it is actually growing. So, and actually, I'd like to give a shout out to our main patrons, the ones who give more than $5 a month. The unfortunately named The Longest Fart, Mr. Pan, Josh Bean, 11th Exile, and Darren Prewitt. Thank you very much. You're very much appreciated here.
Mr. Fart. Serious. Oh, sorry. The longest fart.
Yes, that's his name, all one word.
Wow.
Go figure.
Some people have imaginations that are just stinky.
Hey, this guy's paying us $10 a month so we can afford to have that.
I figured he'd appreciate the name joke.
Fair enough. Okay. And again, future stuff, I'm going to get that final chapter for that series on Patreon. I'm going to probably start working on it once finals are done here. And again, there's the main story I'm working on, and maybe there's developing the Universal Decay system, or perhaps even Heroes of Horror to my the system and setting, and other projects which I talked about in the past. We'll see more on that later. If it gets beyond the embryonic stage, we'll discuss it. And as you mentioned already, Tyler, you're working on Heroes of Horror. Anything else in the pipeline?
Right now, I'm just basically focusing on Heroes of Horror. I've adapted a lot of the material that we had, that secondary material, stuff like the Abomination Codex and things of that nature. I've adapted a lot of the material for that to work into Heroes of Horror, because the system just sucks it up. It's practically anything horror related just like clacks on like Legos.
Well,
I mean, hell, I even have a lot of werewolf stuff in there.
That's where my yeah. All right. So, anything else you want to add about personal projects and or company projects status?
Personal stuff. Well, I hope the next semester go back to college now that my living situation is more stable, in order to finish my degree in mathematics. And then after that, I'll be finishing my my chemistry degree. And, well, you know me, I'm shooting for 10 different master's degrees.
Ambitious. Go for it.
Hey, I got 2 down.
You do. All right. That's it?
Yep.
All right. So let's move on to the topic. The multiverse. You and yourselves. All right. So the format I have is we're discuss the basic concept of the multiverse or cross-planar, et cetera, cross-dimensional, whatever you want to call it. Then it's used in role-playing games and to a lesser extent fiction and video games. But again, before I preface this is going to be where multi-dimensional or cross-dimensional is the primary focus. We'll talk a little bit more about when it's used as a device in role-playing games or video games, but we're going to focus more on it where it's the main thing, the central theme, if you will. So first, multiverse. What is your definition of the multiverse theory, not just in fiction, but also in real life? There are actually multiple ones, which is appropriate, I think.
Yeah. In real life, I'm familiar with 2 of them, brain theory and quantum reality theory. Although, honestly, I think brain theory is more accurate, if there is such a thing as a multiverse, compared to quantum reality theory. Brain theory is the idea that there are multiple consecutive versions of a universe, all intermixing and running concurrently, but one of them cannot see nor influence another. They exist on different membranes of reality, hence, brain theory. But every now and again, the warps and wefts of those membranes get close enough together that they connect, and the sudden transfer of power from one brain to another is what causes things like the Big Bang. And it spawns new brains that then just shoot off with elements taken from each of the parent brains. Like physical elements with the nature of reality, the values of strong, weak, and gravitational forces, that kind of thing. That's brain theory. Then there's quantum reality theory, which is the one that most people are going to be familiar with. The idea that whenever you have a binary or even a multi-directional choice, when you take one choice, another choice splits off, or all other available choices split off and form their own consecutive versions of reality, causing reality over time to branch out and become a bigger and bigger and bigger tree the further you go away from the origination point, which in our case would be the Big Bang, because people aren't the only things that make choices. At the quantum level, quantum indeterminacy comes into effect. Is an electron at location A, or is an electron at location B through quadrupleplex versions of numbers? Each of those possible realities, it will exist, but they'll be going their own separate ways. That's kind of the reason I'm a little bit iffy on it, is because by its own nature, it has to violate the law of conservation of energy.
Well, the idea is that everything that could happen has to happen in order for reality, as physicists have investigated, to make any sense. Why is it that the die only rolled 1 in our universe? In theory, in order for the very complicated mathematics to work out, it'd have to have rolled all 6 sides.
Yeah, but if we're looking at it through brain theory, then we have other brains where it did roll 5 through 6, but each of those different brains is not its own reality that just suddenly came into existence then. It's on those brains it ran 5 through 6, 2 through 6, and then it went on its own separate way. And maybe you end up with another situation where you have one brain that generates the answer 1 and another brain separately that generates the answer 3.
Yeah, that covers the two main broad categories, or all these little sub variations of that. But it's basically quantum, or the quantum theory. Then there's kind of the string or brain theory. Those are the main ones. There's also the bubble universe theory, which is kind of like multi-universes, but not really. It's that after the Big Bang, space expanded kind of in. Not consistently, trying to generate these little bubbles of the universe, where you had little pockets, kind of like a lot of bubbles coming out of a cork. So you have these little universes which are gigantic, but they're separated by tremendous, huge amounts of space.
If I remember correctly, Stephen Hawking referred to it as the cosmic fizz.
Exactly. And they're all still situated based on the same familiar Hilbert space, 3 dimension. We have galaxies, they're far apart, but the universes, they're even farther apart, unimaginably distant. And there are 2 branches of this. One, it's basically clusters of galaxies, which might as well be universes, but they're so far apart, they might as well just be different dimensions. But they still follow the same fundamental physical laws. There's one other theory which states that the universal constants are not actually constant in these other bubble universes. So they actually could have different characteristics.
Yeah, but they would all still exist within one universe. They're all still children of the same Big Bang event.
Yeah, so in theory, if space, if time, if distance, you go fast enough, if you could exceed the speed of light by many times over, you could actually just go to those things in a rocket, in a ship. Even if the laws of physics kind of break down as we know them in some different universe. And that's just one aspect of the theory. It's a little more dull, but seems a little less outlandish. Who knows?
So to continue, so that's essentially what we're working with. But there is one more that I need to bring up. It's a little bit iffy, but it does still bear mentioning. And that's the idea of time travel as a means of producing alternate realities. That
was literally my third one here. My one here as well.
Yeah, like going back in time and killing Hitler. What would the world be like today?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of a offshoot of the quantum model. Just the idea to move through it, and then you treat time as just another dimension.
Yeah,
which is what it is in physics. Honestly, that's not for the debates.
Yeah, entropy's arrow, sadly, though, only points in one direction, so we can't actually travel back in time. Although there is the idea of a closed time-like curve that could be used to travel back in time, but only to the point where you initiated the closed time-like curve. So it's more along the idea of Groundhog Day in that case. You can go back in time, but it's always to the same damn point.
Yeah. Well, there's also the idea. There's kind of the 1632 theory, where you by simply traveling back in time, you create another dimension, or they're already there, so to speak. So it's not violating the timeline. You just create a new timeline, but they both exist at the same time.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned before.
Yeah. Sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah, that's the
just to reiterate it. Yeah.
What did I hear? Oh, that's the Back to the Future model, is I think what I heard somebody refer to it as.
No, because Back to the Future model, they actually changes things. Remember, he started disappearing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but that wouldn't happen in 1632 because
then he went.
That's different.
And then he went back to his original time, and because of actions he took in the past, even though he still existed, his life had changed.
I'm not sure how they posed it in Back to the Future.
His dad was successful. Biff wasn't a bully. He had a car. His band is actually respected. That was just the first movie.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think. Well, let's just move on from there. I'm not sure that's what I'm getting at, but let's just kind of move on here for the sake of time. There are a few other ones which are not. I wouldn't call them quite hard theories, but just ideas which can lead to. They're kind of like softer multiversal theories, or ones which aren't quite multiverse but have kind of some effect. One is the simulation hypothesis,
where the reality is running on some mega powerful computer system, and you can have multiple different instantiations of reality running at a time, and maybe in reality X, somebody's hair is red instead of brown.
Yeah, so it's some effect, but it's kind of like origin of the universe. Okay, if this created the universe, what created it? It's kind of, it doesn't really answer the question or establish a framework. Okay, so what reality is machine or entity that is running the simulation in?
Yeah, my favorite idea is the idea of life after the end of the universe, where you basically just dump shit tons of mass into black holes. And then you have the black holes basically orbit one another, so that you have a bubble section of reality where everything is stable. Then you shell the black holes in your computer systems, and you derive the energy needed to power those computer systems from the extremely slow decay of those black holes as virtual particles pop into existence and create Hawking radiation. Now, since your computer systems are running at an insanely slow speed, it would actually be possible to network those black holes together with, from your point of view, no relative latency because at that point you don't have speeds of gigahertz per second. You have speeds of hertz per giga years.
But again, that's just in one universe. Are there other universes in this hypothetical universe where this simulation construct is?
Oh no, the idea would be that in one black hole you have that computer simulation running, or it would be running a universe on its computer system. Then around another black hole, it would be running a parallel copy of that universe, and the two would be trading information back and forth, and over time the two universes would diverge from one another. And that's just in the case of two black holes. Toss in a few hundred of them, and you can have who the hell knows how many different universes running, you could have a few hundred different universes running, but who the hell knows how one universe would influence the other universes.
The point is that, there's still a simulation and the rules of physics are literally arbitrary in this case.
Yeah. One of my favorite ideas for doing a game world is I have the game world running in this type of situation that I just described, but I don't tell the players about it. So, so they ask, why can't I make spell X? And I'm just, I say, reality won't allow it. Just because,
and this is kind of like an extreme example of the strong anthropic principle being absolutely right.
Yeah,
sort of. All right. So, what other ones? There's also the idea of mental realms, shared consciousness, where it's just a matter of it's like your mind becomes a network. Is that another dimension?
Like Inception.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an old one, but a good one.
Yeah. So there are different ways we can conceive of multiple realities. Now, here, one of the key differences here, kind of critical consequences I want to get into, at least as far as our interest in role-playing games goes, is in these different dimensions, are they just different possibilities, like on Earth, where maybe Hitler won, or maybe where the, where the ancient Greeks lasted, or the Roman Empire lasted forever, or where America never happened, or, are there just dimensions where that's the case, or are there dimensions where Earth is inhabited by elves and dwarves, where magic reigns? Because in one set of possibilities, it's all the same physics, but in another possibility, in other dimensions, different physical laws,
or worlds that are virtually identical, or that are essentially identical to ours, but one small subtle thing has changed that completely fucks with anybody, traveler who goes there. Like, for instance, street lights. Red means go, green means stop. Try driving in that world.
Or a world where magic is real, or in a world where one of the universal constants is a little different, so that life as we know it is possible. But it made a different type of life, more like silicon-based life, more practical. Maybe in this world, silicon can actually be gaseous more easily, and therefore a silicon cycle is more realistic.
There's also something similar. There was a game way the hell back in the day called Cult with a K, and the idea, the idea of that game was that our reality was a consensual hallucination that we were all being trapped inside of, and you could alter the reality by altering the hallucination.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the simulation hypothesis concept.
Yeah, similar, but I think that if I remember correctly, wasn't
50-50 astral thing, astral mental realm, 50-50 simulation hypothesis, kind of like the marriage of the two, I'd say.
If I remember correctly, wasn't that game that I mentioned, Cult, one of the inspirations for the Matrix movie?
Possibly, but I don't know enough about the background of the Matrix to say anything about that, but definitely has some of the not punkish, but kind of punkish stylations. I don't know. In any event, my point is that most of the contemporary, most of the possible, real, in quotation marks, theories of multiverse theory, they tend to posit that it's just different outcomes between different worlds, kind of like butterfly effect, whereas the more outlandish ones result in universes with different physical laws. Okay? And from a role-playing perspective, which one is more interesting? Which one is more useful? How do you handle the two of them?
Well, the more useful version of, from a role-playing perspective, would be the idea that each different plane is a completely separate, divergent reality, so that you don't have to keep track of things like this world is identical to this world. Only, only people have weirdly colored hair. You don't, what if you have the more distinct the worlds are, the easier it is for a game master to keep track of them, and the easier it is for a player to interact with them, because they can say things like, okay, I'm going to Fire World instead of I'm going to World 72 Beta Gamma 3T or 3T.
Yeah, where the only difference is that on one day, an insect happened to scurry to the left instead of to the right on a bench in Central Park.
Similarly, worlds that are similarly, if you limit the number of extant parallel realities, but you make it so that they're all the same world, it's just some event in the past, dramatic event happened. Like, for instance, somebody killing Hitler in the trenches in World War I, and then or the Roman Empire never fell, and then plot out the timeline from there. Then you're in the same situation where you have the regular world and the world of demons and the world of Fae. Only in this case, you have the regular world, and then the world of then the world of no Hitler, and then the world, world of the Romans.
Yeah, because if you go through the just many different possible worlds based on event butterfly effect, it's almost more like time travel, which I'd argue is kind of a separate genre in itself.
Yeah.
We're talking about the central theme here is multiverse, because normally you play in a single world, you have consistent physical laws, you have not consistent, but you have a certain set of places you can go, certain set of people you can meet. In space, of course, it kind of goes beyond that, different planets, but at the same time, there are usually universal laws, universal norms. Even though there are, with multiverses, I think the more interesting things you can actually, if you go different dimensions, you can start introducing, if you want to introduce the gameplay, you have to start changing the rules from dimension to dimension. And that's, I think, the advantage and disadvantage when you go into that sort of setting, that sort of creates that sort of worlds.
Yeah, from an intellectual and a writing perspective, the idea that you can have an infinite number of worlds, all with subtle differences to them, is very intriguing. But from an actual running the game perspective, it is a nightmare. Right?
I would argue it can be the other way around, because if you're doing different dimensions, different physical laws, you have to keep track of all those affect gameplay. So if the players go in the fire dimension, suddenly you have to keep track of how in the fire dimension it's hard to make water work, or in this dimension your car works, in this other dimension your car doesn't work.
As opposed to going into a dimension where electrical current is measured on, instead of 120 volts out of the wall, it's 110 volts.
It's basically the same thing, though. The rules, the same rules of physics just apply.
That's actually my point. That's actually my point. In that case, as a game master, you now have to keep track of all the events that are going on in every world that is virtually identical to the player's originating world. Only you have to keep track of every one that they now interact with, even though they're virtually identical. But there's still just variations of the same thing, whereas you have an entirely different culture, an entirely different set of races, entirely set of rules as far as physics go, all different bases for how space may exist in the more extreme ones. Tristan, because they're variations of the same thing, it's easy as a game master to get what happens in Universe X confused with Universe Y and accidentally swap things around. That's what I'm trying to point out.
I personally would think that would be harder to do the more extreme ones, but I can see your point in that they're similar. You have to keep track of a lot of little things.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I prefer to have when I'm dealing with games that have different realities, I prefer to have my realities greatly distinct, even if they have the same actual physical and game material properties. Having realities where the other plane has a completely different population and topography, it makes it easier as a game master for me to keep track of what belongs in one plane versus what belongs in another.
Kind of two sets. There's the few number of dimensions, distinct rules, and the multiverse or the many dimensions, many possibilities style.
Yeah.
Would you think that's kind of a fair distinction? That's the two main flavors they come in?
I would actually say that those are more like opposite points on a scale, and you can slide the scale from
that's
one
better.
side
Yeah,
to another.
they're the two extremes of a spectrum. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but it's also a matter of how much you let your players have access to them, of course, too.
yeah.
Maybe they exist, but they're impossible to get to.
You can also just use them as background information for what's going on in the realm that the players actually exist in. Like you could explain. Okay. Back in the day when I was messing around getting the rule sets all put together for Dead Stars, I had a setting where the idea was that it was our actual world with our actual physical laws, but every now and again, other different planes with different physical laws would kind of like make temporary contact with our world and overwrite some of our physical laws. And the players were people who had to go in and try and save people, people who were trapped in these areas. And I
remember that campaign.
Yeah. Over the course of time, they would, or if you let's say you walked into an area that had been infested with a magical world, and you walked out with a +1 flaming sword. Even though magic doesn't exist in our reality, that +1 flaming sword still worked in our reality.
Yep, and that is one of my favorite explanations for magic in otherwise mundane setting, or just in general, intersection of another dimension onto ours, which operates in different fundamental laws. That's my favorite. It's not most original. I'm not the only person who uses it. It was actually the whole point of how magic works in the Witcher series, but it's my favorite.
All right, so what's up next?
So, one thing is how constrained. Let's more fundamental question. What is the advantage, or what are some of the what's the advantage, or what's the interest, or what's the fun, I should say, in doing a multidimensional campaign?
The ability to cheat.
Mm-hmm. That's what it gets down to. It makes the rules more malleable, which again is the advantage and disadvantage. It's more of a headache on the DM's part, but it's also so much fun. I think if you go too far, though, you start straying into really bad fan fiction territory.
Well, okay. Let's say that you actually have a universe that consists of only 2 planes of existence. Our real world and a shadow version of our real world in which nothing is alive.
Mm-hmm. But, technically multi, but go on.
Yeah, technically multi. Well, at that case, you still have a secondary dimension, and people who go into that secondary dimension, the shadow realm, would slowly die over time as their life force gets leached into the surrounding environment. But you can still use that to cheat. You need to break into a building. You go into the shadow realm. You put a block of C4 on the backside of the building. You detonate it. You walk through the wall, and then you leave the shadow realm. And now you're inside that building. But nobody noticed that the wall behind you got destroyed because it hasn't been. There's
that, and I also think that it also really is a good campaign setting for an exploration-focused campaign.
Oh, yeah, especially... Okay, using that example before of just 2 realities. Let's say that even multiple bazillion realities exist, but each reality can only intersect with a certain limited number of other realities at certain geographic locations. Well, then you can go from your original reality to your new reality, and you can have an entire campaign based around trying to find where in that new reality you can use to get to yet another.
Mm-hmm. This is, again, I don't know why. I know they're hard to run. They're kind of out there, which is why people don't, it's not as popular because, the whole familiarity is what makes people like certain media's thing. But I don't know why there aren't more role-playing games, and they're even TV series kind of focused on this concept of exploring the multiverse. Because I can think of a series which is almost like that, but was wildly popular, and that was basically the central theme. Stargate.
Yeah, and it even had that geographic thing that I mentioned before.
Yeah, and it was tremendously fun, popular because they're different planets, but you could have easily just been exploring different dimensions.
And then MGM basically went bankrupt and shit all over the property.
Now, that aside, the point is that there aren't a lot of role-playing games which use that as a device for exploration. You can explore a set world, or you can explore worlds, and it's also good if you're more higher end, snooty role-playing type. It lets you explore philosophical concepts.
Well, if you think about it, any game that has a large degree of space exploration involved is essentially a planar travel game.
The point, though, is that you can have laws of physics change from dimension to dimension. You even have Fisher Kingdom type dimensions where the people themselves change when you go from dimension X to dimension Y. That opens up whole new dimensions. No pun intended.
Yeah, there's
that's not you don't get that in space travel. And the space travel, you sometimes have the headache of, well, it can be either a good thing or a bad thing. If you want space travel, you have to have a ship involved. With multiverse travel, all you might need is a portal gun.
True.
Which again, it can be an interesting way to handle it. So then you don't have to have a huge complicated ship. Of course, having the ship may be part of the fun, but otherwise you could just have a simple portal.
Well, one of the original book properties to explore this concept was way the hell back in the day, the Amber series by Roger Zelazny.
I know of it, but not much of it.
Yeah, it was trippy. The idea was that you had a multiverse made between two polar opposites, one being chaos and one being law, and the closer you got through the multiverse to one or the other, the more that influenced what happened in that world. Like a world that would have a high amount of chaos might just be made out of floating islands in the sky, whereas a world that's made out of a high amount of order would be a stereotypical cyberpunk megalopolis that just covers an entire planet. And there are families of people, one from chaos and one from law, that were born with the ability to literally walk from one world to the next.
I really wish there were more properties which kind of use that, because it's just the it really lends itself well to an episode of the day or adventure of the day style campaign, or a longer term one if you want to. I'd like to see more properties where you start seeing cross-dimensional empires forming. There aren't a lot of them, at least in mainstream culture. And even in main culture, there are not a lot of them, even though it's an interesting concept. Well,
to reference our introduction, there's the Citadel from Rick and Morty.
Oh, yeah. And of course, it's an interesting concept. I mean, it's more interesting in the fact that it's populated basically by just two people. I can think of another book series, a kind of young adult series, where the main character essentially has to draw upon different versions of himself to fight an evil empire. He gains the ability to basically draw upon different versions of himself as basically a weapon.
I don't know the series you're mentioning.
I can't. It's only a vague memory. I remember reading it in a bookstore briefly, but I didn't buy the book. I kind of wish I had. But at least the concept is interesting there. But that's kind of my point. Use it more as a device. Well, in fact, that's one property. That's one idea I want to kind of use to create a new campaign setting, or along those lines, where there's more of an established planar travel type thing, or at least an agency or something along those lines.
Okay, in the Heroes of Horror setting that I'm running, for those of you who don't know, Heroes of Horror is our world, but all of the fantasy elements have always been there, and it's more or less consecutive to our history. In the Heroes of Horror setting that I'm running, one thing that I did was I had a Confederate colonel who at the end of the American Civil War went back, used a tome of dark magic to travel back in time. And when he did so, he ended up decades prior to the Civil War, stuck in China before the Boxer Rebellion. Well, because of his influence, the English ended up winning the Boxer Rebellion, and a lot of English nobles got onto a boat to go to China to now, divvy up and determine what they were going to do with their new lands. One of the player characters, who at that point in time was about 200th away from the English throne, accidentally got sick and had to stay behind while mysteriously the boat blew up in transit. And now he's third in line to the English throne, and the two people who are ahead of him, didn't want him to be close, or didn't want another accident to happen, and so they ditched him, kicked him off to Europe for the 1850 Munich conference. And what I was going to do is, during that Munich conference, I was going to have a cult of demon worshippers try to take over Central Europe using a horde of demons. But one of the players in the party, considering this is a horror game, remember everybody, was cursed, where anytime he got near a dead body, it reanimated. Not under anybody's control. It just came back and started going on the brain-eating frenzy. Well, they ended up accidentally stopping a demonic apocalypse by starting a zombie apocalypse.
Okay, two things. First of all, I'm a little rusty. Sorry, go ahead.
Not done. So they then fled Germany, keep in mind, and went to Paris, and went on a tour of Paris. And what's under Paris, Tristan?
Brain not found. Under Paris, literally, or like south of Paris?
Literally.
Oh, a lot of very old sewers. And a lot of Roman ruins as well, if I'm not mistaken.
And the catacombs.
Mm-hmm.
Which are lined with...
Oh, yes. Yeah. More dead bodies. The only other possible place there would be more dead bodies would be underneath the Vatican.
And basically, at that point, France goes bye-bye. And we ended up doing some things and advancing the game 10 years. And now they're over in America trying to get horn in on the American Civil War. Or I should say, over into the Americas, trying to horn in the American Civil War to basically buy up huge tracts of land from one side or the other, and turn themselves into robber barons.
Tracts of land. Couldn't resist.
But the thing is, what they've discovered is that there is no American Civil War because they have fucked with the timeline. Thanks to their actions in Germany and France, the two biggest buyers of South American cotton are no longer in the business of buying any South American cotton. So the economy of the South was never sufficient, or didn't grow to the point where they could actually fund an army. Because of that, the Civil War never happened.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to point out. How time travel can be used to create an alternate timeline, and you can use that to fuck with the party, because the party's own actions are what have created the alternate timeline.
Well, that's again where I would argue that time travel is a slightly different but related aspect to dimensional travel here. Because here the party will be influencing things on a greater scheme.
Yeah.
Well, at least in one dimension. That's my point.
Well,
right. A few more things. First of all, wasn't the Boxer Rebellion only semi-successful at best in any case?
Yeah, it was, but it was successful enough that England was unable to annex a huge portion of China. They ended up basically forming a kind of treaty between the two. But in this
the famous unequal treaties, yeah.
But in this reality, the Boxer Rebellion was just completely curb stomped, and the Chinese military was totally annihilated.
Well, they basically were during the Opium Wars, but that's another story.
Yeah.
So, in any event, when we were talking a lot about these, there aren't a lot of examples in media where they used dimensional travel as the main focus. Again, there are a lot of media where it kind of shows the advantage and how it could be used. But let's think of some examples where they do use actual multiverse travel or multiple dimensions, and it's a central theme of the media role-playing game, not just a device that's used once or just precipitates the events around the story or the world.
In terms of media, there's the TV show Sliders.
There's Sliders. That's an excellent example where they're travelers from dimension to dimension. It's a lot like Stargate. That's just one. It could be the traveler trying to get home story, and you have a different challenge, different worlds, a different set of rules every time. Then there's also Rick and Morty, which that's not the major theme there, but it's a major device in it. So it's kind of multiple possibilities. It basically gives the writers freedom to do whatever they want. Essentially, it also acts kind of like a Doctor Who device where even the main characters are killed off. Well, big whoop! That was just Rick and Morty from Dimension 297-5. So it lends it a lot more use right there. And of course, there's my personal favorite, Planescape, which is a little more limited to the D&D Plannerverse, but it's one of the few examples where you are dimensional travelers. There's an established dimensional culture, so to speak, and there are a limited number of dimensions, but dimensions are very distinct, and they have their own rules, and it's one of my favorite settings for that reason.
Speaking of
anyone you can think of, Tyler?
Speaking of game settings, there's also Rifts.
Rifts. Oh yeah, Rifts. I have a love-hate relationship with Rifts. Cool setting, but
even fans of it have a love-hate relationship with it.
Yeah, where basically it's a shattered dimension scenario where a whole bunch of different dimensions got jammed up together on Earth, and now, rifts. The word says it all. Yeah, and the rules are all jammed up together too. Sigh.
There's another one that I can't remember the name of. It was moderately popular. It was a similar concept to Rifts, but it was more of a tournament play thing. And then the results of the tournaments would influence the next book that they would put out.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also GURPS, which GURPS almost in itself is not going to be multiverse, but multiple possibilities. But there is a GURPS Infinite Worlds where it actually takes the many possible outcome, multiverse, where in Dimension A, Adolf Hitler was killed early on, and we have this one version of Earth which developed that sort of dimensional travel, and now they're going through all these various possible versions of Earth, and getting mining resources, making treaties with other worlds, and trying to fight back more dangerous versions of Earth. So that's another one. GURPS Infinite Worlds might be worth looking to.
There's also Call of Cthulhu, where creatures from other realms of existence are trying to consume the planet. And there's a board game version of it called Arkham Horror, where the central tenet of the board game is trying to go to these other dimensions to close the portals.
For being so outlandish, so well out there, it actually I would say that Call of Cthulhu uses the more bubble universe theory of multiverses, where different dimensions are just simply very, very far off. That's how H.P. Lovecraft is almost describing a lot of them, just being very, very far off in space.
Very true. And then you would have basically Stargate-style wormholes from one to the other that things could slip through.
Yeah, and he says himself, he was basing this off kind of a pre or proto-Einsteinian concept of physics and reality, where the laws of physics are not universal across the across space.
Yeah, for a guy who was totally nutballs, H.P. Lovecraft came up with some really interesting insights into scientific concepts.
Well, he wasn't so much nutso as he was repressed, influenced by a lot of really old and stupid ideologies, and especially at the beginning of his life was very sheltered, which allowed those ideas to fester. Later in his life, he actually started traveling more, and he got a little less intolerable in many ways, in multiple definitions of the word, but then he died of basically stomach problems.
That's true.
Yeah. Let's see, other ones, not just tabletop role-playing games. Well, one more tabletop role-playing game, Jags Wonderland. Have you heard of that one? No, Jags Wonderland?
That one's new to me.
Okay, and this one, people, when you go nuts, or at least not most people, when you're nuts, you're not going insane, you're going onsane. And that reality, you're not losing your grip on reality. Reality is losing its grip on you. And there are 9 different chessboards of reality, which represent different fundamental abstractions of reality. And the lower you go, the weirder things get,
If we're going that direction, you're essentially describing the Silent Hill video game franchise.
Yeah, but here it's kind of a conspiracy, because there are things in the lower chessboards that want to destroy humanity, because we understand mathematics and imagination. They only understand imagination.
Oh, that actually brings up a media series that I would be greatly remiss if I did not mention. Mm-hmm. The Laundry Files series of books by Charles Stross.
It's a maybe, because the multiple dimensions aren't necessarily a central thing per se, but I know it's close enough.
The entire series is about fighting off invasions from creatures that are from other dimensions.
True. So yeah, I give that one a pat. I understand, yes, but I'm thinking more in terms of multi-dimensions, more like, you actually travel there, or there are other ones interacting. But yeah, other ones interacting, I suppose that's fair, yeah. Because the trope of different dimensional threat on our reality as an explanation for a threat is just used so much. I'm in term of multiverse. I mean more traveling, more free interchange. You go to multiple ones. You use multiple ones. But yeah, I see what you mean.
All right, that's all I can think of, to be honest.
Going back to Jake's Wonderland, the very bottom chessboard is called Department of Works, and if you get there, you basically become a god because it's where the fundamental laws of physics become machinery you can use and employ. And the idea is that humans will one day get there, destroy it, and become masters of nothing and everything. So it has influences from Alice in Wonderland, of course. That's why they call it Jake's Wonderland. Just thought I'd mention that one.
Well, then that also brings up Alice in Wonderland. What's the other side of the looking glass if not another freakier dimension?
True. All right, but we talked about like mostly books and role-playing games. What about video game examples?
Well, I already did bring up the Silent Hill franchise.
Well, of course. It's not, but I wouldn't say multiverse is necessarily a central theme there. It's another dimension, but you could just as well call it a dementia or character's mental world trapping. It's kind of blurry there, but I wouldn't say that's a strong theme there. And there's just one other dimension.
There's also
there's
also the Chrono Trigger franchise from way back in the SNES days, but that was more.
The first one was
more time travel.
Yes, but then the next one, the Chrono Cross, was multidimensional.
That's true.
And that was actually the next one on my list here after Jake's Wonderland. Yeah, but beyond that, I actually went on the TV tropes page in case there's any I forgot, but there weren't that many, which kind of leads me back to my main point here. It's another underused concept, campaign setting, et cetera. You see a lot of this in crossover fan fiction and a lot of, even in original stories, they overuse it, but I find it just kind of, I think you get too much everything and the kitchen sink syndrome where you just throw in magic, wizards, cyberpunk, everything and just stir it in the pot and make it work. I think for it to work, you have to have be more satisfying. It has to have more of a central theme. It has to have more of a concept where it operates. Even if the laws of physics break down, there has to be some sort of theme holding it together. And that's what I think what makes them work better. As a media, as a role-playing game, as a series.
Yeah, you don't want to turn whatever it is you're working on into basically a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, or just like set in like a school or a world where, oh yeah, there are wizards, there are dragons, there are goblins, there are robots, there are androids, there are magical girls, there are slime people. Just have it all in there and they just interact. It's not that hard to do that, honestly.
Oh, hold on. There's one thing that I'm forgetting to mention. Let me go find it real quick. It's in this part of my email because I'm a backer for it. It's an MMO called Crowfall, and the entire basis of it is the idea of going into a dimension that's dying, assuming a persona in that dimension and fighting for the whatever resources are left over with the other or against or allied with other players in the MMO.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that a while back. Yeah, and wasn't there recently a Dark Souls-esque style game where you kind of do that and you're fighting against this weird plant monster?
Yeah, it's called
its name though.
Bloodborne.
Not Bloodborne. Well, yeah, Bloodborne. But there was one like that where multi-dimensions is actually a central theme, and Bloodborne is just 2 dimensions, and it's kind of more the silent hill thing than the multiple dimension thing. I forget its name, but in any case.
Yeah, I think I know the one you're talking about, and you're fighting incursions from other dimensions that alter the world around you.
One dimension that alters the world around it, but you also go into other dimensions which are actually friendly then, which is why it's kind of a surprise that it comes up. You don't see it coming initially.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it.
But yeah, that was a good one actually. So, but again, my point here is that if you just take everything in kitchen sink approach, you got to make it work somehow. You have to have a central. You have to establish how does the dimensional travel work. Is it a machine? Is it more something more esoteric? Is it a matter like maybe dimensional travel cannot be done with machines? It has to be done through mental training, through meditation. That's something that may be original.
Oh,
or maybe it's
actually
something so.
Actually, that's the main concept. What you're describing is the main concept of the Netflix show, The Man in the High Castle.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. The idea being that basically through meditation, you can transit from one parallel reality to another. That's essentially the world that you came from, but where something has happened differently.
Yeah, or maybe it's just maybe dimensional travel is something that isn't. Yeah, dimensional travel is something inherent in every sentient being. Just that unless you know how to do it or are taught by someone, you never stumble onto it in a billion years.
Yeah, in the Man in the High Castle, people travel from one dimension to the dimension of the Nazis conquering the world. But they bring tapes from other dimensions where, like where like ours, where the Nazis lost, or dimensions where the Nazis never rose in the first place. And it's those movie reels, and those hunting down those movie reels is the main point of the TV show.
And in Planescape, there is kind of these repeating motifs, these ideas. Belief creates reality because you're in the outer planes. So, and there's also the kind of thematic theme to it, so it works a little better than just the everything in the kitchen sink approach. So, if you're going to make this work, what do you have? There's a checklist for making a multi-dimensional campaign setting or series work. What would it be, Tyler?
You have to determine whether or not your dimensions are limited or unlimited, and you have to determine
the first one we discussed. Yeah,
and you'd have to determine how much that they're supposed to diverge from one another. You also have to determine how much things from one dimension can exist or work in the other dimensions. A good idea for that, in my opinion, would be to have a base underlying rule system and then alter and then have like different things that would happen in another from one reality to another. Like, for instance, in a reality where the world is filled with nothing but floating islands, maybe you can never take falling damage.
The rulesmith in me approves, but the more artistic person in me also screams, well, if you could make it work with even more fundamentally different rules, that would be almost a thematic key difference, satisfying difference in the role-playing game where the rules themselves alter. It'd be hard to manage it, but it would be also kind of lead to an intersection of both the setting and the rules themselves, where the rules themselves change depending upon where you are in the game. It'd be hard to make it work, though.
Yeah.
But again, I really like to see a role-playing game like that. As hard as it would be to make it work satisfactorily and not create too much of a headache. So there's that. So anything else, Tyler? The checklist? Well, my point, there has to be a central theme. It can't just be do whatever, unless maybe doing whatever is the theme, like in Rick and Morty.
You also have to determine how easy and the mechanism by which travel from one reality to another works.
And unless you're just doing it as a one-shot, it has to at least be only moderately difficult, because if it's super duper hard, it seems to be more of a device than anything else, a one-shot device.
Well, if you made it super duper hard, you can have it be the main motivation of a campaign would be to get everything together that you need to get the fuck back home.
Yeah, well, that's true. Like maybe you create a world where resources are growing thin and there's a breakthrough, but it's hard to create a dimensional gate. And once you create a dimensional gate to somewhere, it's set. You can't change it. So if you aim it at the wrong dimension, suddenly you have Hellspawn going over as opposed to a bucolic planet that's ready for habitation.
Or let's say...
And then you have to do it again because suddenly you need another resource. So you have to then create another gate and learn how to steer it better.
Or let's say due to a cosmic accident or a fuck up in an experiment, the party ends up in a world filled with that's been conquered by Nazi elves, and all the other races are like basically kept as slaves, and nobody in the party or everyone in the party is human because they came from like a world similar to ours, and now they have to repeat the experiment to GTFO.
Or maybe in this world there is vast supplies of unobtainium, and they pretty much have they have a choice of either trying to tame this world or get the fuck out and then find it somewhere else.
Which actually brings up another media property that I just forgot until now. The anime and manga Drifters.
That's ringing a bell.
The idea...
Isn't that the one about the great heroes from history being brought to some sort of tournament setting?
Yeah, well, it's the one about people, or people from history that at the point of their death are brought to a world that's a fantasy world, elves, dwarves, and all that. That's going through its
the isekai animes. They're becoming very popular these days.
Well, it's going through its version of World War One. And the heroes who get transported to this world either are ally with or end up either fighting for one side or the other, depending upon their own personal philosophies.
Yeah, and this being anime, aren't they all transformed into cute girls?
Oh, fuck no!
Really, I thought that was the theme.
No,
what happened?
No, they're their actual selves. The only conceit is that when they're transported, they all get like a download of the local language and can talk to one another.
All right, maybe because that happens sometime in a lot of the isekai. Am I pronouncing that right? The isekai anime?
Yeah, isekai.
Because it's seen a renaissance right now, for better or worse. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great.
Oh, Drifters is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about isekai anime, my personal favorite is Log Horizon. But the funniest one is Log Horizon Abridged on YouTube. I laughed my ass off.
What about Arafruta or whatever it's called, from the weakest to the strongest?
Yeah, that one's a decent little power fantasy. But I like things that have a bit more going on in the actual world itself, rather than just basically a tour of a world with a big ass gun.
Yeah, and that's a different type of world or setting. Although it's related to multidimensional, Lost in Another Dimension or Lost in Another World or Some Everyday Hero. Related, but not quite. I'm thinking of more of it where it's a regular thing.
I think if we do a podcast covering isekai stuff, it should be its own separate thing because it's become this huge.
But again, I really want to see more media which takes place in a multidimensional empire, a multidimensional city, because those are just so interesting. There aren't that many of them in media either.
Well, actually, there's a Gate, thus the JSDF fought there.
True, but I said there aren't that many relative to all the other ones which just use it as a threat, Dimensions as a threat, the evil outsiders who are coming upon our world, or just a one-shot or one part of the major story.
True.
Sure. So, and I think that's the best thing to end upon there. I think we made our points or discussed it, unless there's anything else you want to add.
Well, for people who actually listened to the end, what are we going to cover next, Bob?
Time travel. We traveled Rick. Now we're going to cover what inspired Rick and Morty.
Gotta go back in time.
Or forward in time.
That's true. There's and what happens when you go back in time, change something, and go forward in time, or what happens, or when you go forward in time, learn something, go back in time, and change it.
And Multiverse is about exploring possibilities, and time travel, you're creating possibilities. So you might argue it's even more powerful than that.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite
in some interpretations of it, anyways.
One of my favorite series of novels is called the Dire series, Dire, and they had one in that series called Dire Time, where a supervillain ends up getting sucked back into a alternate version of World War II and has to find her way home.
Well, we'll have to wait till next time. So, signing out here. This has been the Daemoneye podcast number 15. Multiverse, you and yourselves. I'm Tristan Eifler.
I'm that dream that you had last night where you woke up screaming.
He's J. Tyler Burrell, and yes, I use your full name to annoy you. And we will catch you on the flip side. Yo.
All right. J. Tyler, out.